And what I'll do is I'll share my screen here. And just in case you don't know where you are, here we are, the Flourishing Educator Certification. But I want to start with the problem. I want to start with the problem that we've been seeing. And we probably all know what the problem is. I probably don't even need to tell you. You've lived it. It's interesting for me talking to educators last year, but even for over numerous years. What I've noticed is that this isn't a new problem of mental health issues, kids falling through the cracks, teachers not knowing how to help these kids who are struggling, the fringe kids. They say many times, I'm not a social worker. I wasn't trained in this. This was before COVID. And then COVID hit, and now the aftermath. And there's an interesting stat that I read, if I can actually click forward. This is from a study that was done last year that 97% of the participants who were surveyed, these are teachers, they stated that they had experienced increased physical, mental, and emotional workload and the job demands. And that was just during 2020 to 2021. And so I posted that on my Instagram story because I'm always wanting to hear from people and hear from educators. And one teacher wrote me back and said, you should do a comparison of this past year because this year was way harder. And I think about 97% of educators saying that it was already hard enough. One of my friends who is an educational psychologist in New York City, this is what she said to me. She says, I'm surprised it's not 100% because sadly, this isn't new. It's only increasing. And then another one, an EA, that works on the West Coast. She says, yeah, I've been doing this since 2018 and this rings true. 2018, it's 2022. And so we didn't really have a plan before. And it's interesting, on my Facebook this morning, a beautiful teacher had commented on a stat that I had done this morning about what we're about to talk about. And she said, we do have a mental health pinpoint person, but it's one person for numerous schools and numerous students and numerous teachers. There's no way that one person can handle the weight of what we're experiencing right now. Another wrote to me, many teachers want to have time, training, and resources, but simultaneously they're angry. And I don't know if you're feeling angry, but she says they're feeling angry and exhausted. Many say, I'm not a social worker, and it's not because they don't care. It's because they are literally past exhaustion. Now, I hope that after a summer of hopefully you had some time off, that's not how we're feeling right now. But what I fear is that this feeling that many felt at the end of last year is going to be the way we feel in October if we don't do something about it. This was again from the same study that teachers are stretched to their absolute limit. Their mental health and well-being are in jeopardy, and they need on the ground immediate supports. And so that's where we come in. I'll introduce myself just for a moment. I've been working with teachers, educators, and schools for 25 years. And it's interesting, I started my work in East Vancouver with youth at risk, working in a lot of poverty, addiction, schools that didn't have a lot of funding, schools where we had a high Indigenous population, schools where there was abuse and addiction and poverty. That's where I started my career. And, it's interesting, I moved to Calgary in 2006 and all I ever knew was crisis. And when I moved to Calgary and I started working in middle class and affluent schools, as well as schools that were experiencing the same of what I was used to in East Vancouver, I found it very interesting that the same issues that I saw in the ghetto, I was seeing in the affluent schools. I was seeing in the middle class schools, the anxiety, the depression, and it has certainly grown. And so what we did was, and I'm going to introduce some team members in a minute, but what we did was we thought, what can we do about it? In our company here at Certified Flourishing Coach, we have evidence-based tools. And so we thought, well, we know teachers are exhausted and we know that students are experiencing some severe complexity. And so what if we could take our strength and lend it to you? And so I want to introduce our team. And I'm going to introduce Heather Bell Williams in just a moment. But just so that you know, like it's what we're about to present to you is, like I said, evidence-based training. And where this comes from is we have a gentleman that works with us. His name is Dr. Wayne Hammond. He has been working in school systems for, well, longer than me, on this idea of strength-based resilience, flourishing, which is a psychology term, which moves us away from a disease model that says, what's wrong with you? And asks what I love my friend Christina says all the time, what's strong with you? And that's the whole basis of flourishing, the psychology of flourishing. And this is where he brings his expertise to the table. You can see myself there. I explained a little bit of where I'm coming from with my experience, but I would love Heather. Heather, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Great. Thanks, Connie. I'm really, really excited about being with you and the potential for you to be taking part in our certification program for educators. Like Connie said, my name's Heather Bell Williams, and I've been in public education for 34 years. I've been in a couple of different provinces. Most recently, I retired from the principalship in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, here where we still live. And I've been involved as a classroom teacher and as a special education teacher, as a vice principal, district coordinator for special education, and most recently, like I said, a principal. And so super excited to be here and to bring the tools and some of the experiences that I've had along the way and put them to good use in this context.
It's awesome to have you a part of it. And Heather has actually
Thanks.
helped design this entire program to make sure that we are reaching educators right where they are. And on our team here as well, I would just want to acknowledge in our flourishing certification, we have people like Stephanie who are on the call, Weena who are on the call, Christina who are on the call. And so we're so glad you're here as well. And then I wanted just to mention that this is Abe Brown. He is the CEO of our company. He has been a counselor. He has worked in nonprofit, in poverty reduction type of work, very extensive work in resiliency. And so I want to start with just a story of why I personally really care about where you're at and where our schools are at and where our teachers and students are at. This is my son. He's my oldest. I have two boys. I have a 15-year-old who he's now 15. In this picture, he was 8. And I have an 11-year-old. And this is my oldest son on the day that he came home from the hospital after being hospitalized for suicide ideation at age 8. And this is my son. I have a background in mental health and resilience, and yet my son has been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, oppositional defiance disorder, which I don't believe in, by the way, and I would love to share more about that, maybe at another time, ADHD, and he is on the spectrum. And it's interesting that out of his 11 years of education, he has had 3 years that have actually been okay for him in school: kindergarten, grade 3, and grade 6. In fact, I believe at this point we've even dropped out because this is one of the kids that has fallen through the cracks. And this is my son. I have resource after resource. I knock on the principal's door. I am a team player. I am a village creator. And yet my son is falling through the cracks. And I keep thinking to myself, if me, who has all the resources in the world around me, can have my son falling through the cracks, then my goodness, my son Ben is one of hundreds of Bens, hundreds of thousands of Bens right now who need us to know how to work with these students, how to work with the ones that can't get to school. Last year in grade 10, he made it to school 9 times, 9 times. And when I would knock on the door to ask the school, they had no idea what to do. In fact, many times they're like, get in line because we got a whole lineup here. We have a whole lineup of Bens. And so how are we going to help the Bens of the world? And so here's our vision. We're looking for innovative educators who want to lead the way. Now, you might not think you're innovative, but the fact that you're here tells us that you are innovative. And we're looking for people who want to reimagine educators. And we're not denying the reality of the devastation that has gone on, but we're committed to finding solutions for students, for every student, to experience mental well-being, purpose, and belonging despite the odds. And here's the beautiful thing. You know, we often look to governments to solve our problems. And yes, yeah, they might be doing that, but there's something about people who decide to make a difference. And I know that if you and I, if we decide to do something together, that things are possible. And Heather, I would love for you to share, what do you envision? What's your heart to see through this for educators?
Thanks, Connie. You know, I was chatting with some fellow educators just last week, and we were talking about it being August and that feeling of, oh my gosh, for most of us in Canada, at least, August is that time where you start to sort of say, oh, you know, we're going to go back to school. And you start to think about needing to plan and think about the workload, think about the little kids that are coming or big kids that are coming into your care. And then we talked about something that educators would understand completely, getting your Sunday nights back. And that Sunday night ritual that I'm sure all educators have in some form or another, where you realize, I've got to spend some time, I've got to do my planning, I've got to get ready for the week. And quite often we long to have our Sunday nights back. And that's what I envision. That's my heart for you as educators who might take part in this certification, that you'll have the tools that you need to not come to Sunday night with that feeling of, oh my gosh, there's another week coming, but to come to Sunday night with that feeling of, oh my gosh, there's another week coming where I get to make a difference, where I'm healthy. And the first piece that we want for you is that you would be taking care of yourself and just learning those tools, and you know most of it, but to practice it and to really get some of those, like Connie said, evidence-driven tools in your toolbox, that you can take care of you and that you can learn what you need to be resilient, and then the tools that you need to help all of those kids with simple needs, with more complex needs, with all kinds of traumas, but that you look forward on Sunday night to the week ahead because you have the tools that you need to move forward and to be productive and to feel great about your work, to have that sense of competence that we all desire.
Mm. And if you wonder if that's possible, well, we believe it is. And I love
Absolutely.
that vision, Heather. I love that. So we are looking to redesign a new path for students to be trailblazers. You know, you are culture creators. When I think about the future of our kids, I think parents and teachers. That's who's designing the future of our kids. And so you can't ignore trailblazers, the ones who say, enough is enough. Let's do something about this. Let's do something about the future of our kids. It's interesting. I did something a little crazy the other week. I was a youth speaker at a youth camp, 47 years old, speaking at a youth camp. And the opening night, I asked the students, these were ages 11 to 15. I asked them, do you believe there's hope for your future? And I had an open mic. I said, anyone can come up to the mic. What a risk. And I one by one, these students came up and they kept saying the same thing over and over. No, I don't see hope for my future. Hope is too painful. And I thought to myself, here is our opportunity. Some people say, oh, that sounds horrible. No, no, I see an opportunity for the adults to rise with some bravery. And so I want to remind you that you're not just an educator. You are providing students with the tools to build resilience. You're building capable, strong leaders. You're creating a culture of empathy that can end bullying and suicide. You're making a way for strong innovators to rise up. You are a big deal. But many, even though they know this, and this is probably maybe why you came into the profession, the reason why I came into the profession was I wanted to make a difference in young people. But the problem is that we lack the desire. And so what we do over 2 days is not about teaching you more knowledge. In fact, the more we've talked to educators, they say we learn so much. We read so much. We've listened to Dr. Jody Carrington. How many of you know who she is? How many of you listened about connection over and over again? It's not the knowledge that teachers are lacking. I mean, maybe some, but most. The ones who care are not lacking knowledge. You have professional days. But what I've heard is that in those professional days, again, dumping knowledge and there's no practical application. And so what we want to do over 2 days is take the knowledge that perhaps you've learned and maybe some things that you haven't, and really apply it to right now. to this school year, lots of experiential learning, and leaving with a plan of how you're going to implement this. And we're going to do it during the 2 days. We're not going to send it home as homework because we all know that you don't have time for that. And so what we're going to learn in those 2 days is the science of flourishing. Again, it's a science. It's not just a nice, fluffy, beautiful word. It literally is rebelling against a disease model, and it's moving students and teachers towards this idea of strength-based resilience. I think that resilience alone is a subpar, substandard goal. And it's been my goal in my profession for 25 years. And I realized that over the last 2 years, you and I, we are resilient. We've made it. We're still here. But you can be resilient and miserable. How about we start moving people towards thriving in their life? We're also going to teach trauma-informed education skills, but not just teach them. We're going to apply them. We're going to work on them. We're going to workshop them. How do you create connection with kids like my son, Ben, who has what I call an FU face? He is the prickliest of the prickly, my son. He does not trust any adult. How do you reach my son? Well, I'm going to share with you secrets and we're going to practice. We're going to really dive into conflict resolution and self-care strategies that actually work. And boundaries. How many of you feel the need already for boundaries? I mean, that's huge. And so I think that it would be fantastic if you took this 2-day certification. I think that if every school had one person who had this training, then they could pass it on. I think that that would be fantastic. And that would do a world of good, but that's still one person. What I would love even more than just you or somebody else taking our 2-day certification is I would love for you to work with us, your whole school, and become a flourishing school. What does a flourishing school look like? Well, it's a school that basically says our whole team is signing up for the school year. And it doesn't matter if you start in December. It doesn't matter if you start in September. It doesn't matter if you start in May. We're going to be committed to building this over the course of a year with your team so that we can really dive in. So every professional day, we can dive into these tools instead of you having to, just learn it over 2 days and then just, well, good luck. We want to coach a whole team through this. And so that honestly, in my expertise, in my experience, I believe that this will change the game. But if not this, at least one person, you taking the certification could make all the difference for you and your students. And that is enough. But I would love to even have these types of conversations. And we have people on our team here who would love to work with you for a year. And so I want to end before we take some questions and just share with you a story that has stuck with me probably for 8 years. A story of this guy named John who was in grade 6. I remember going to this school. It was a middle class school. And I used to do a lot of work in dance and in circles. And this boy, John, came to me before we started the class. And I would always invite students to go into the middle of the circle to dance, if you could imagine. And at that point, they're nervous and they don't like doing that on a great day. But John didn't come from a great home. He had all the strikes against him. And that day, I didn't know all of this about him, but he came up to me and he said, "Please don't make me go in the middle of that circle." And I said, "Oh, John, no, it's your choice. You don't have to go in the middle." And that day, the circle on the outside was so supportive. It blew my mind because I could always tell the psychological safety of a school by how those circles went. If people were leaning in and the kids were cheering one another on, I knew that teacher had done something intentional to build that type of culture. But if the students were withdrawn and pulled away, I knew that we had some work to do. Well, these kids were on fire. These kids were cheering everybody on. And it was so safe and it was so electric that all of a sudden I watched John go into the middle of the circle and start flailing his arms. They weren't dance moves that were great by any means. And he's flailing his arms and everybody's cheering him on. And I'm watching the teacher and she's just teared up because for 6 months she had worked with John to create courage, to create resiliency. And she had worked with her students to create a culture of belonging. She said to me after, you don't understand, John has been diagnosed with severe social anxiety and he's often paralyzed. And this is the first time I've watched him go and do something like that. And I said to her, it's not because of what I did today. It's because for 6 months, you have created the right place. You've created the right atmosphere. You've had the right tools. And I think I walked away from that going, it is possible. It is possible for John's story to be your story of your students that you see that are paralyzed by crippling anxiety, that in a moment that they have those times where they're feeling like they can do it. They sense a hope for their future. And so this was just an information session to let you know what we're doing, what we're teaching. I mean, by all means, I certainly haven't covered all the bases, but I'm hoping what we've done today is inspire you to think that the way things are don't have to be the way things are. We know too much from scientific research in our company that flourishing is possible. And with the right tools, you can see this for yourself and for your students. And so I want to pause there. If you want to take a screenshot of this, this is my email. You can set up a one-on-one call, or if you were invited here by someone, you could set up a one-on-one call with them. And we would love to chat with you. Our first date, which is the beta, is September 24th and 25th, if you want to write that down. It's a Saturday and Sunday. It's online, so you can join from absolutely anywhere. We're going to be doing 2 days, and it's our beta, which means we're giving a very special deal, because from the beta, we would love your feedback. And so I'm going to pause there.